Om Brahmanandam parama sukhadam kevalam jnanamurtim Nonduality gagana sadrisham tatvama shadi laksham ekam nicham vimlamachalam sarvadi sakshibhutam bhavatitam trigunarahitam sadgurum tannamami. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one is the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. And there it is. There we have it. That one supreme Brahman, Brahmanandam, the bliss of Brahman, parama sukhadam, is the supreme happiness. Kevalam is alone and is indivisible, all by itself, the only reality. Jnanamurtim, the very form, murti, of jnanam, wisdom, who is dvandvaititam, beyond all dualities. Gagana sadrisham is the witness of everything, the seer. Vimlamachalam is achala, unmoving, staying the same and steady in all things. And all that beautiful chant contains, which allows us to meditate more properly and more concentratedly upon that one reality, which is what we do in spiritual life. We take a higher ideal and we focus in on it. Of lower ideals, there are probably many and varied, spread among many souls and many people with different levels of desire, intentions. But we know that for the lovers of divine reality, the seekers of truth, those who want freedom first and foremost, that one reality existing in all things is the most important, and very difficult to see that amidst the variances of the world, activities over and underneath the coverings of Maya, at different levels of consciousness, underlying everything that vibrates, from the word all the way down to the element earth, which all of those tattvas have been listed for us in the Samkhya philosophy. So much has been given to us so that we may separate the wheat from the chaff, the real from the unreal, and begin to focus in on our true nature, that witness of all phenomena. Sakshibhutam, the chant says. So we look to great slokas like that, which are eternal, long-lived, and which still find their way into our minds in this day and age, which is a marvel, really. Because there are people with so many different ideals out there, putting their attention on everything that moves. But this is Vimla Achalam, this is the unmoving that makes everything else possible, like Sri Ramakrishna's stories of the vegetables dancing in the pot of hot water, and the child thinks the vegetables are dancing on their own. But the mother has to explain that it's the boiling water that's causing them to move. And then father comes in and says, actually, it's the heat underneath in the burner that's causing the water to get hot that makes them move. And then the grandfather comes in and says, well, there's a gas line hooked up to that burner. It's actually the gas that's making the burner hot. It causes the water to heat, that causes the vegetables to take on this appearance of movement. And there's a great storage of that gas because he's worked for the gas company. He knows there's a great storage tank of it just up the street and pipes running underneath into the house. So in that way, we find that there are many causes and effects going on. And Samkhya Yoga and Vedanta all look to that cause and effect. Satkaryavada, they're vadas, paths that look at cause and effect very deeply. So you can trace origins of things. That's called utpatti. On Sunday, we're looking into Lord Vashishta giving teachings to the young avatar Sri Ram, the Treta Yuga. And so he gives out that teachings. One whole section of that scripture, Yoga Vashishta, is called Utpatti. It's all about origins. So one has to look deeper beyond the physical causes and effects that are going on of two objects bumping against each other in space, kind of thing. And what happens, that cause and effect is all in the physical, but what happens in the mind when you think something, as Vivekananda has often explained to us, is the cause of all of that. And it's very powerful. If you can think something, it will be. And so you have to be very careful with your thoughts at the same time when you discover the power of them. That might be why so many people haven't really discovered the power of their thoughts yet, because their minds aren't pure, their intentions aren't pure yet. And so what they would think would cause problems. And we see evidence of that in the world all the time in terms of these untenable and unacceptable things that are going on, called war and violence. So minds that aren't being very careful with what they have understood about the power of thought and then engaging in action, all that's called rajas and tamas, of course. You don't want to act under the auspice of those two gunas, those two modes of nature, activity and slothfulness, because the results or the effects, cause and effect that comes out of them are just like them. Maya's evolutes are just like Maya. They just evolve into more of the same. Like there was this asura called Raktabija, and whenever Divine Mother cut him on the battlefield, every drop of blood that fell from his veins turned into another Raktabija. So she ended up fighting thousands of Raktabijas. Finally, she gave birth to Mother Kali out of her mind's eye, and told Mother Kali, whenever I cut him or slice him with my weapons, before the blood hits the ground, you lap it up with your prodigious tongue, and then it won't turn into another Raktabija. And so Mother Kali did that, and the demon was vanquished. But that Raktabija demon is just like the mind thinking and thinking, many thoughts, adding so many vibrations into the mix, not balanced, not well thought, not contained, not controlled, not focused. And so Father of Yoga has to come along at some age and say, well, there are 4 or 5 kinds of mind out there, vibrating mind. And there's a scattered mind, which is rather ill, sick. And then there's the mind that's trying to, the dull mind, of course, which isn't trying to gather these thoughts back. It's just gone to seed, like weeds in a garden. And then there's the force of gathering, the mind that wants to gather things. So that mind is sometimes balanced and sometimes not balanced. It does erratic things, and then it enjoys some sort of respite once in a while. So that's a gathering force. And then there's the mind that's gathered, that's called ekagra, or eka, of course, means one in Sanskrit. So the mind has finally gotten itself gathered together. That's difficult to do, like gathering mustard seeds from a package after they've been blown out by the wind, see, and then trying to gather them back. Is the analogy they use for trying to gather the scattered mind in yoga. And then there's a mind also that's niruddha, they call it. That's beyond just gathered and focused, but it's no mind. Niruddha means it's really been nirvana, nirbija, no seeds. Nirvikalpa doesn't have any imaginations or desires going on. It's not caught in time. And so that's the mind that's transcendent, the witness of all phenomena. So you can see how you can just take one chant and go on and on about it, thinking it, looking into the meaning of the words, applying it to the cause and effect process, all with the intention of seeking the origin, which is your very self, when it comes down to it in our traditions. Vivekananda said, I'm a Vedantist. I hardly see God anywhere else but in my own self. So that would be the starting place, and also the ending place. That's the supreme destination. And then as you move along the journey, then inwardly, that's called involution. Then you have to let go of all these things that you've evolved yourself. Your thoughts have evolved. That's called sankalpa. One of the 5 God blogs we'll look at in an hour and a half or so away is about that sankalpa process. And they think there's a creator God out there, but their real creation is my unreal mental projection, is what the Vedanta says. So everything that's been cast out by the mind in terms of vibrating thought, the vibrating buddhi, is going to have its day. And so the adept yogi or yogini wants to be able to draw those back, dissolve them, and then maybe not engage in them or learn how not to engage. Pure, formless, actionless, and divine. The Upanishads call that one reality. And so after the sankalpa process is engaged in enough, and the fun of having thoughts turn into objects, and then the soul going and playing amongst them, objects of its own creation, one learns to withdraw them, hopefully, and not get caught out in them. And then maybe rethink it and not do it again the next time. There's always that possibility of remaining balanced and steady. And that can happen inside the body and beyond the body, both. It's a rare marvel when it happens inside the body. You see somebody who's living a perfectly balanced yogic life, like we saw my guru, Swami Sheshanandaji. So these are the thoughts that come up in satsang this morning for an hour. Why don't you all contribute and ask questions or give insights, talk about your readings, share with us what you have experienced in your studies and your meditations. That's what coming together in a group like this, satsanga, is all about. So who wants to start us off with something that's on their mind? This would be of a higher vibration, I would think. Or then maybe you're just all perfect yogis and yoginis and your minds are just very balanced and you just come and look at me for an hour on Saturday morning because you're just looking at yourself So if that's the case, then we can sit in silence and I can think of some things to say. I'm never at a loss for words, you know me. Yes, Imre, shatter the silence.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste. Um, actually, um, recently I've been wondering about the relationship between Mother Kali's name, the Kali itself, and Kala and Mahakala, and any relationship between these, and also it just came, but it has just come to my mind before the satsang, how in Sri Ramakrishna's life with Totapuri, the event took place with Kali's form to um, how it was withdrawn. So if you could reflect on these aspects and this event.
Well, what you're speaking about, probably the most interesting aspect of that play between Sri Ramakrishna and Totapuri, because Totapuri was the consummate non-dualist, and he had reached a very high level of realization in that non-dual discipline, if we can call it that. It's really more of a state of arrival, but we think that there are observances and practices that you do to reach non-duality. You can't just magic it into being like people are trying to do nowadays. Pretend to be it. There are long-standing practices, and they call that Advaita Vedanta sadhana, actually, a very wonderful term. So Totapuri came to Dakaneshwar temple and saw Sri Ramakrishna there and said, what a beautiful man. He looks like someone I could pass this great wisdom on to, transmit this Advaita to. And so he talked to Sri Ramakrishna and proposed to him that he become open to this way, this Advaitic way. And Sri Ramakrishna said, wait, I'll go ask my mother if it's okay. So Totapuri thought, he's a crone man, what's he have to ask his mother for? So he disappeared into the temple and of course sat before Mother Kali and, oh mother, there's this man out here who has come and says he has something to share with, is it all right if I open myself? And so all of this is, of course, you can read this in the Great Master and some about it in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And the offshoot was that they entered into that relationship together, and Totapuri was shocked to find Sri Ramakrishna immediately, within days, already having the vision that he had taken years and years, probably lifetimes, to try and attain. So, of course, this is back to what we're studying on Sundays right now. Nobody in the court of King Dasaratha knew that Ram was an avatar when he was in his teens. And that was still all veiled, except to Vishwamitra and Vashishta and a few other. There's 12 rishis on earth that knew that Ram had been born. It'd be like the three wise men in Christianity or something. Oh, there's a star there. There must be a great soul born. We've got to follow that. So in every age, there are a few people that know that some big event's happening on the spiritual horizon. So much like that, then Totapuri, was thinking of Sri Ramakrishna as a qualified student to receive this transmission. And even in India at that time, you don't walk around and find people ready to receive Advaita. That's something very rare and special. And people are really, as I said, you really have to qualify yourself to that to a great degree. There are so many things in which you'll have to do with your mind in terms of practice and purification and sadhana, ongoing, and mastering meditation, not just posture and breathing. So when this wonderful thing happened, then Sri Ramakrishna had a complaint just before he had his realization. Totapuri, he says, I'm sorry, I cannot give up the form of Mother Kali. She's standing there. I mean, we all wish we had this problem, right? So basically she's there. in my mind's eye. So Tatapari is kind of, exasperated by this because he didn't know anything about Mother Kali. That was what he had come there to learn. The whole scene appears to be that, Sri Ramakrishna is going to receive the Advaita from Tatapari, but Sri Ramakrishna was a past master and an avatar. He didn't need to learn anything. So Tatapari didn't know this and was about to find out. It would take some time staying with Sri Ramakrishna after that vision to find out that not only did Sri Ramakrishna awaken to that Advaitic influence, but Tatapari had to awaken to Mother Kali. So this was an exchange that was happening on the level of Shiva Shakti, divine couple, the transcendent reality and the dynamic power that's a part of it, that's inseparable from it, really. So in this way, when Tatapari found that Sri Ramakrishna couldn't get beyond his Ishtam, the vision of his Ishtam, which he had realized perfectly. I mean, that's a very high state by itself to realize and have darshan with your Ishtam most any time you wanted. I mean, he was a priest in the Kali temple at that time, so it was a perfect setup for him to just rest in an ecstasy in the vision of the Divine Mother in one of her most powerful aspects, if not the most powerful. That Mother Kali is awakened Kundalini right there. So Tatapari had this problem, he's got to get beyond form. So he looked around on the ground and he saw this piece of sort of sharp piece of glass or something there. And he put it up to Sri Ramakrishna's forehead and pressed it there. He said, concentrate here. So Sri Ramakrishna did that, and he said he saw the vision of Mother Kali's form just explode into light. And he entered into that highest samadhi and was lost for hours, days maybe. So you can read about this in different accounts, and that's sort of this beautiful play between the supreme formless reality and the dynamic form of the mother that we call Shakti or Mahashakti in her case. And that play that's going on then continued because Tatapari, his rule as a traveling monk was not to stay in one place any longer than a few days. That was the rule of that sect. So he found himself trying to leave after Sri Ramakrishna came back down a little bit and could function. And he couldn't pull himself away from Sri Ramakrishna. He was just too attracted. And there was some force keeping him there. So he's camped out on the river from the temple a little bit. We've all been there. We've taken a boat ride up to that place and gotten out and walked into the temple. A lot different nowadays than it was then, all jungled and everything. But he camped out and cooked his food as they do. You have to eat your own food and cook it. And so one night, I guess he was camping there and he stayed longer than usual and he got some dysentery. And so he couldn't meditate. So he said, this body's not allowing me to meditate. Time for me to give it up. I don't have anything more to realize. So he walked out into the river, and actually we've been at the river there at night. And our boat left a little bit too late and trying to get there to the ghat where the Kali temple is and gotten stuck, on some of the sandbanks because the Bay of Bengal, the river has flowed. The tides have changed and the water has gone down, so the boats can't very well navigate. You hit the bottom. So he walked out into the river and said, I'm going to give the body up, and tried to drown it. And he couldn't find water deep enough at that time of night. And so he stood up. I mean, this is very interesting that they would have that little attachment to their body. I mean, they could just let it go. You hear about this. In fact, we know this is true because Swami Damodaranandaji, which is one of our SRV supporters, Ramakrishna Order Swami, whom I visited in Fiji so many times and learned the Gita from. He gave his body up a few years ago in the river voluntarily. He just walked out and put his crutches down, went into the river right there where some of the ashes of the direct disciples are buried. And he just walked out into the river and gave his body. 2 or 3 in the morning, the cameras there, because they have to have cameras now up at Bellarmont because of the thieves and problem causers. And so the cameras could see him, go across when nobody was watching. They probably wouldn't have let him do that. They tried to talk him out of it, but he just went and gave his body up. So this is what Totapari was trying to do that night, and couldn't find water deep enough to do it. So he stood up, kind of exasperated with the whole situation, turned around, and there's the Kali temple. If you've ever been there at night with the moon and everything, it's beautiful with the main temple and the 12 Shiva temples, and then the temple to Radhakrishna, all of these spires there. And he stood up and turned around and saw that, and immediately had a vision of Mother Kali. And it was the first of that kind that he had. He'd always thought, that the formlessness is greater than form. I mean, that formlessness is the ultimate goal, and he's probably right about that. But the fullest of all knowers of reality know that form and formlessness together, that's Mahayoga. That's knowing both the dynamic and the static side of reality. That's Mahayoga. That's the fullest. There are many souls that can go with their Ishtam to a kind of heaven, like Vaikuntha or Kailas. There are many souls who can go into formless reality and give up the body and never come back. And these are all both great, but the greatest of all, if we could opine, is to say, would be that one who had the fullest reality, who had the experience of their Ishtam, knew all the worlds, and at the same time could get into formlessness like Sri Ramakrishna could at the drop of a hat, as they say. Anything would cause him to go beyond form in his mind and have that experience that Totapari had helped him to achieve that fateful night. So this was what happened to Totapari, and then he wanders off the face of the map. We never hear about him again, and they had that consummate realization. And so you look back at it all and you see that Avatar teaches all beings at all levels, even at the very highest level, how to go on to the next step. And Sri Ramakrishna himself used to say, a bird can fly high, but there's always higher places to fly the next day. And occasionally it has to come and sit on a branch and just think about what it experienced up there in the skies of awareness. So this is a consummate knower and a consummate lover and a master of non-dual meditation and a master of life and a reliever of the misery and sufferings of humanity, at the same time all rolled into one. If you ever have a chance to read what Swami Vivekananda wrote about Sri Ramakrishna, it's amazing. And this was a man who would not talk about Sri Ramakrishna the whole time he was here amongst us, because he didn't want Sri Ramakrishna turned into a cult or into a personality worship. In all his talks, he would never talk about his guru. You had to press him to try and get him to talk about Sri Ramakrishna. And when you did, you had to say, well, they'll find him on their own. I don't want to hurry the process there, because this is what happens when religion falls, is when people start concentrating too much on the personality and forget the principle. And then they start depending on a savior instead of themselves. And so this process is going on. So we did find out about Sri Ramakrishna. How could we help to do that? So then in his writings, his letters, you can read, there's actually in the complete works section called the Letters of Vivekananda that he wrote and received from people. The things he said about Sri Ramakrishna were just magnificent. Oh, all the avatars of the past, they were okay. But this new one beats everyone on record, he says. This new, India has a new God and a new scripture and a new dispensation with the coming of Sri Ramakrishna. So you can see how very serious he is about his guru. And Vivekananda himself could have been the avatar if Sri Ramakrishna had not appeared. That's how highly they think about Vivekananda. I've heard people say that before. In fact, I dreamed about one last night who said that. This is one of the priests, one of the people who told that to me. Well, Vivekananda could have been the avatar if Sri Ramakrishna hadn't have come. I dreamed about that person last night. So anyway, some reflections on that beautiful play. This is one of the many facets of the play of Sri Ramakrishna, the play of Tatapari and Sri Ramakrishna. A lot of that couldn't get recorded, of course, because it was more personal and private between the two of them, but enough of it did when Sri Ramakrishna spoke about it that we have it on record. So it's just one of the facets in that huge diamond of Sri Ramakrishna's Leela. A Leela that's come on us quickly. I mean, it took a long time for Christ's Leela, Buddha Leela, Ram Leela even to develop and people to cherish it and think about it and unite themselves with the Ishtam. That's one of the ways in which you do that is to follow the Leela of that particular avatar. And that's what beings are doing when they follow a great soul like that. Maybe not so much the personality, but what that being did on earth is the Leela, the divine acts that they perpetrated and performed, and those beings that got saved or even liberated in Sri Ramakrishna's case, have people that got their liberation, their moksha, not just their salvation. So in the facet of a play like that, then Mother appears shining. She's the light that shines out of that facet of Tatapari and Sri Ramakrishna in the diamond of Brahman. She's the light that shines out. So we find out about her indirectly through stories and occurrences like that. Otherwise, she's totally veiled and hidden. Yogis can seek for her and envision their whole lifetime and never get a vision of her. There's a song that says that in India. They sit in dark mountain caves where there's no light at all. So the minute they close their eyes, it's light, dark inside, dark outside, just to simulate the darkness of Mother Kali, the blackness, and then just to see any little sparkle that comes inside of consciousness. The Upanishad said it's like fireflies sometimes, or sometimes it's like a beam of light or a bolt of lightning in the sky. Different forms of light appear and different sounds, like a flute in the distance, a kettle drum down low. These are all quotes from the Upanishads of what happens with divine sight and divine sound. The very sight and sound you and I are utilizing right now to discuss the Dharma and inspire our minds with, that very same sight and sound that is the cause of these outward eyes and lips and tongue and palate and all. You take it to the nth degree inside, and then it turns into those divine properties. You see without eyes there, speak without mouth or tongue. Minds speak to each other that way silently. Dreams are rather like that. Visions are like that. somebody's having a powerful dream or a vision, they're laying there, their lips may be moving, but there's no sound coming out. See, they're having an inward conversation with the being that they've connected with. And sometimes you can see the monks, muttering, their lips are moving, their mantras going all the time, all day, and no sound is coming out. I think that's called upamshu, or where you do the mantra muttered, not silent and not out loud, but in between the two. So yes, some of the beauties of the tradition and of true religion and non-dual philosophy put together in a supreme personage, or supreme personages, because Tatapari was, of course, a very highly realized soul. That's funny, you think it, and then you say it, and then you think it again. See, so, and this is this process of thought to word, and then the meaning of the words get concentrated on and thought about again. See, so they say that Shiva without Shakti is not perfect, because all the wisdom is fully realized in Shiva, but it doesn't have a vehicle yet to express itself. So Shakti has to get together, with Shiva and give him that opportunity for all of that wisdom to come flowing out. And that'll turn into worlds and beings and principles and every other thing you can think about. And then when it gets taken back again, when Shiva dissolves everything back into the thoughts that he had, the great thoughts he had, and everything just gets taken back in. So that's really all we're doing here when we come to satsang. We're saying something, thinking about it. That's something we said came from something we studied inside, or something that we knew. Education is just the manifestation of the knowledge already within us, is how Sri Swami Vivekananda put that. When we go to get educated, we're just trying to manifest the knowledge that's already within us. We're never learning anything new. There's nothing new under the sun. In fact, the problem becomes that we just keep regurgitating it, learning it again and again, forgetting it again and again. When's going to come that time when I think it and know that that's the truth of myself, and then I can play with it without getting stuck in the outer manifestation of it. And I can take it back in as easily, as my teacher used to say, that about vairagyam and detachment. He says, it's one thing to detach, but it's another thing altogether to be able to attach and detach at will. So there's this attachment that happens to things outwardly that we ourselves have formulated. Why would, because maybe there's some selfish grasping going on there, or there's some fear. We see the thing, we see how powerful it is. We don't take responsibility for it. We give the responsibility to some other power outside ourselves when it really wasn't the case. And then we get attached to that. People get attached to that, and then they have to try and practice detachment at some lifetime in some form. And then they get that detachment and they go back to their source, and there maybe you have a soul that's through with sankalpa, through with it's become world weary, as they say. But then you have a soul that can attach and detach at will. If you learn the secrets of the creation, so to speak, Shrishti Rahasya, the secret of manifestation, creation. And then you want to go back and help a few souls to understand that. Because maybe you met souls who were on the verge of understanding that. And still had impediments and problems, and you know how to work them out for them, then you go back and you help them, then that's the person that's going to have to know how to attach and detach at will. A great soul will even have to be able to take on ignorance and give it up. And that's no easy thing, because ignorance is a frightening thing to them. It's not something you want to let in, because once it's there, then it's darkness in a cave for thousands of years. You're going to have to go looking for a torch and find the cave and cast a light. So taking on ignorance, like they say, the baby Krishna, saved the village, saved his village from the floods by picking up Mount Govardhan and holding it over the village like an umbrella. There's a piece of art that I have that has Gopala, picked up a whole mountain, this little baby, and held it over the village, and the torrents and floods are just coming off the mountain. The mountain's kind of shaped almost like an umbrella. And so then he put it back down and went back to being a baby. So a few weeks later, his uncle said, "Oh, Gopala, would you pass me that stool?" And Gopala said, "I can't do that. I'm just a baby. I can't lift that." So that's how these great souls can take on things and do things that are amazing, and and then just return to their everyday consciousness, as Zen says, just everyday realization, every man's consciousness, they call it in Zen. By learning to attach and detach at will. A good thing to think about if you're still tripping up on trying to detach from your attachment to something or any given thing. Isha, you look like you're about to say something. I can tell by your smile.
You're right. Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone. I have been reading a little bit in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. What's his name again? Patanjali? Oh, yeah. Thanks. I almost forgot his name. Patanjali, yeah, indeed. And in the first chapter, there is a special sloka, which I'd like you to maybe clarify a little bit for me, but there's a pretext to the sloka, which I'd like to read. There's maybe like 2 or 3 slokas here. So I hope you don't mind if I would just read all of them. The first sloka, the 23rd sloka of the first chapter. Realization may also come if one is oriented towards the ideal of pure awareness, Ishvara. And then it continues and says, Ishvara is a distinct, incorruptible form of pure awareness, utterly independent of cause and effect, and lacking any store of latent impressions. It continues and says also, its independence makes this awareness an incomparable source of omniscience. Existing beyond time, Ishvara was also the ideal of the ancients. Ishvara is represented by a sound, Om. Through repetition, its meaning becomes clear. And then here it says, then interiorization develops and obstacles fall away. And I mean, I guess I have, there are a few translations which may translate these slokas a little differently, but I'm thinking about this word, interiorization, this inner development which is taking place through the invoking of Ishvara through the word. So but by repeating Om, Ishvara becomes by repetition, the meaning of the word Om becomes clear. That's what's being said here. And then it's talking about this interiorization developing and all the former obstacles which may have troubled you falling away. And if you could maybe shed a little light on this term, interiorization, what is really taking place here?
Interiorization, it's to internalize. No, you're doing fine, except Patanjali's. That's called getting tongue twisted. But basically, we were just talking about that, weren't we? Is that Kali gives Shiva, Divine Mother gives Shiva that opportunity to externalize everything that's internal. So we think about this absolute perfection, which is our true nature. We think on that in Vedanta. We don't think upon sin or other things. Ishvara, we water the flowers, not the weeds, they say. So Ishvara is this one greatest of all flowers in the garden. And this is what keeps the one thing, those three slokas are probably the only thing that keeps pundits and commentators from calling yoga a system that doesn't believe in God. If he hadn't have put those few slokas about Ishvara in there, then yoga just really seems like a philosophy that's headed toward the practice that gets you to the formless. So there's no mention of God. Same with Samkhya Yoga. There's in Kapila, it's kind of amazing that they've categorized it under the Ashtaka, the Orthodox, because there was no mention of God in all of those sutras. Of course, there's not many sutras left in Samkhya to look at that from the original Samkhya, because they're gone now. So that those three slokas talk about Ishvara as being a very special soul, and that translation is very nice and concise. I like the way that it put it together. The way you were reading it, it went to all the main go-to places, including the word at the end, and putting it in terms of this special soul that is the very fount and source of omniscience, the all-knowing. And that's why they have us meditating on Ishvara after thousands and thousands of years in India, as that commentation said, concentrating on Ishtam all that time. So with Patanjali, then, he wants to make sure that that there's those different routes to formlessness. I mean, basically, he's given you 7 different methods in Yoga Sutras to concentrate upon the Lord. And I'd probably only maybe one, maybe possibly 2 of those are without form. The rest are all inside of a practice and have a visualization connected to them. But the Vishoka Jyotishmata, he calls it in yoga, is meditating on a formless ocean of light. Side by side of that, he has meditating on the form that is most pleasing to you. So he's very complete in that way too. It's just like what I was talking about with Ramakrishna. He has the form and he has the formless meditations, both well in hand and mastered. And so there you see it in Patanjali's sutras too, is that he has that knowing a little about a lot, as we were talking about in the God blog last week. He's a general store owner. He knows a little bit about everything that's on the shelf of the Divine Mother. Divine Mother means manifestation and form and dynamism and power and worlds and plethora of all these varieties of principles and all that, all there seated in the heart of the formless reality. And the Ishtam is then that pivotal place. You get to the Father through the Son kind of teaching, to which all beings can go to when either the Maya gets too much for them and Brahman can't be reached yet. Where do you go? Who do you call? So you must call the name of the Lord and go inside and meditate in your heart on that form to connect you back to your source again. Great souls have used that method. You might say, you get off a merry-go-round, everyone's dizzy. So you have to kind of stagger around a little bit to get your feet back under you. Or that's even more prevalent when you get off a sailing ship. My gosh, you've been out rocking all day and they put you on shore again. You don't get you hear what they say about sea legs, but what about land legs, getting them back? Get your sea legs on, but you have to get off the ship and walk, and you got to kind of almost walk off the dock into the water because you're reeling from that effect of the ocean. So it's the same when you come out of these higher states called samadhis or bhavas, that even great souls will have to kind of catch their breath again and reorient themselves. And so that's why Ishvara is that steady pillar of light. I mean, it's interesting the way that commentator put it, is that that's formless. Ishvara is formless. You see, that's something that we've also looked at. I mean, you can't really call Mother Kali a form, nor can you call her completely formless yet. She bridges the two so perfectly. So that would be the case with her son too. That would be Ishvara. That's her prime son, is that God with form, highest form of God the human mind can comprehend, to quote Vivekananda. So then they go to that to center themselves, and it'll act as a doorway into the formless light. It's that gateway that opens right there in the third eye, when the clouds just go away and you see this shining, perfectly cylindrical third eye, Jnana Chakshu, Krishna calls it. And there is the shining light beyond it. So in that experience, then Ishvara stands as the go-between or the intermediary, and helps you with your internalization process to go within. You're going to have to break down the Brahma Granthi first. It's a knot. It's hard to find words for it. It's like a membrane, a subtle membrane that souls are bumping up against when they're trying to get out of being animals, basically. Because, I mean, I used to really object when science is called human animals, but then I started to think about it. Yeah, until you become divine, you're still an animal and you're acting like one. Humans are the worst of all animals on earth, really, because they should know better. So when you finally get beyond what they call pasu in Tantra, your animalistic desires, then you become virya, heroic. And by the time there's a different class of soul called virya, they're heroic because they're trying to help all beings, not just satisfy their own animalistic tendencies. And then after that, there's daiva, which is divine. They become thoroughly divine. That's your true nature there. And all those other were phases you passed through. So anyway, when you look out upon humanity and its doings in this day and age, which is really easy to do because the media has made it so, and all the mechanisms of science, then you can't help but think that there's these beings walking around. They're still very animalistic and haven't cast off those tendencies yet. So that's why Ishvara becomes available to those beings who are seeking to get beyond that level of vibration. Well, we filled up our whole hour with just two questions or 2 points made by those in attendance. So that was a wonderful session. Thank you for guiding me into it and through it. And being that attentive, focused consciousness that's in all of us, being willing to find it and exist in it, prefer it, and maybe hold it with you now for the next hour. So may peace come to all. May wisdom dawn upon all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, Peace be unto all. Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Tat Sat.